Let's go to the front line. Since the beginning of the day, there have been 87 incidents. The demoralized Russians continue to terrorize the border communities of Sumy and Chernihiv regions with shelling and drop-guided aerial bombs on them. The situation is most tense in the Pokrovsk direction. There, the occupiers stormed 11 settlements 25 times today. Our military corps commander is with us now, live from the frontline zone, Oleg Kornienko. So, Oleg, congratulations. We are waiting for fresh reports from you, and I also know that you were in Konstantinivka.
Hello, Tetiana. Yes, I really was in Konstantinivka. In fact, I've already been in Donetsk region for 3 days now, and I should say right away that the connection might drop because I'm currently in one of the units holding the defense in the Pokrovsk direction. In fact, that's exactly where I am right now. And the Pokrovsk direction remains one of the hottest spots. In Donetsk region, the Russians continue to actively attack both Pokrovsk itself and the neighboring city of Mirnohrad around the clock. In fact, the occupiers are striking these cities both with aerial bombs and drones while also simultaneously using artillery. The Russians are flooding the cities with their manpower, and holding on to these cities is extremely difficult. Because after all, the Russians are not sparing their forces here, but our paratroopers are still trying to hold back this enemy onslaught and destroy them whenever the Russians try to gather or hide somewhere. Even though the cities are almost completely destroyed, yet the Russians still manage to find places to hide. The logistics situation itself also remains extremely difficult just to reach the positions. Sometimes our soldiers have to walk 15 to 20 kilometers on foot, all while under attack from enemy drones. The situation is extremely difficult, and first and foremost, this is because there is a severe shortage of people. But despite the lack of manpower, the fighters of the defense forces are holding both Pokrovsk and the neighboring Mirnohrad.
The enemy is making a great effort to enter with large forces, to concentrate specifically in Pokrovsk, because this would later give them a free hand, allowing them to encircle our units that are still there in Lysivka and Novopavlivka, as you can see here on the map. To close this off, as if to encircle our units. We are trying not to let this happen.
Overall, unfortunately, the entire front line in Donetsk region is under fire. Starting from Lyman, the Russians are pressing on Semimiso there. Unfortunately, the enemy also has successes in the Siversk direction. And another one of the hottest spots now in Donetsk region after Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad is actually the Konstantinivka direction, the city of Konstantinivka. In fact, the Russians have been trying to bypass it for a year now. Here they are trying to repeat the scenario of Kurakove, as we remember, attempting to cut off the logistics itself. So now it's also difficult to enter the city by car. It's almost impossible because all of them are immediately shelled by drones. At the same time, so-called Russian waiters patrol the roads who instantly take off and burn everything. So I'll say right away that if a month ago I managed to walk into Konstantinivka on foot and cover more than 17 kilometers through the city, this time, just a month later when I arrived, the situation had changed dramatically. I literally had to spend the whole day either sitting in a shelter or just hiding under the trees. Russian drones are constantly patrolling the sky. Both heavy bombers and FPV drones are operating. And actually, I want to show this story so that viewers understand. To get to the positions, in my case, I later returned from Konstantinivka, but for the soldiers to reach their positions, sometimes they have to cover a short distance, and it can even take them several days. And of course, they don't come back. They have to move forward to hold their positions and maintain this defense. In fact, I entered the city together with the fighters of the 49th Separate Assault Battalion of the Carpathian Sich. As usual, in the reports, you will see props. The fighters are raising funds for drones, so I ask you to contribute. And now I suggest you take a look at my report on the situation in Konstantinivka and its surroundings.
Just a few months ago, these nets protected against enemy drones, and now their remnants sway in the wind. This is the road to Konstantinivka. Some call it the road of life, others the road of death. The roadside speaks for itself. Enemy drones fly here almost around the clock. The Russians are trying to repeat the scenario of Kurakov and Pokrovsk to block our logistics and take control of the roads.
Basically, it comes in using optics. It sits down by the road and waits for vehicle movement. Then it takes off.
To reach Konstantinivka on foot, for the soldiers of the 49th Separate Assault Battalion Carpathian Sich, this has already become routine. Sometimes just to cover even 2 kilometers, it can take hours. The sky is literally swarming with drones.
Honestly, we're worried. We try to move carefully, and so little by little, we make our way through.
I'm also trying to enter the city together with the assault troops, a city that just a year ago was considered a relative rear area and was quite crowded. But it's extremely difficult to take even a single step here calmly. This is...
Look, that's a drone, just so you know.
It's impossible to figure out whose drone is whose in the sky here. So you have to spend a long time sitting in the shelter, waiting for the right moment to slip out unnoticed. They really do, in fact. You know.
Will save our lives. But they also attack us with gas. And
Have you already had to put it on?
of course,
The fighter with the call sign Kalash could talk for hours about the enemy's treachery. He spent more than 2 months at the position and managed to get out of there right under the Russians' noses. At that time, the occupiers were actively advancing and the front line was quickly...
the situation is constantly evolving and undergoing significant transformations, indicating a continuous process of alteration and development. After the route, we were given the coordinates of the minefields, which we had to cross. We made it through, thank God. Somehow we made it.
Now, together with his comrades, Kalash is holding back the enemy to prevent them from breaking through to Constantinople. Meanwhile, the sky falls silent and we set off again.
In fact, as soon as we stepped out, it started again. Drones start flying and the detector keeps picking them up. An FPV drone is flying somewhere over the fields, and we can hear something hovering here.
Hiding sometimes in houses, sometimes under trees, listening to the explosions of shells and the buzzing of drones, we make our way to the city. But these are just the outskirts of Constantinople, with hardly a living soul, streets of abandoned and ruined houses. Enemy metal has left its mark here, in almost every yard. The city itself is under constant fire almost around the clock. Apartment buildings, schools, shops, and kindergartens are burning. Everything that was alive just a year ago is being destroyed.
In fact, this is what the outskirts of Constantinople look like now, the private sector. Not only the city center is being destroyed, but also here. The private sector is almost completely destroyed. Here, every house is totally ruined. Russian metal is practically wiping out entire streets.
And if last month I was still able to make it to the city center, this time it became an extremely difficult task. Most of the time, the soldiers and I had to hide from drones. It was already starting to get dark on the road, so we had to head back to avoid running into so-called waiters' ambushers. Today, the soldiers are returning with me, but when it's their turn for duty, it sometimes takes them the whole day just to reach their positions. And this story is a vivid example of how air superiority can seriously impact a country's defense. But despite the daily danger, the assault troops keep advancing, holding the approaches to Constantinople, even when the enemy is burning everything down square by square with Grad rockets. Ole Kornienko, Zakhar Komach, Fact ICTV, United News.